The fluorescent hum of the corner office on my last day felt like a dying wasp trapped in a jar, a sound I had long since learned to ignore, but now, with the abrupt silence of my professional future, amplified to an unbearable drone, a high-pitched whine that seemed to reverberate not just in the acoustic tiles above but deep within the cavities of my own skull. The window, a vast expanse of polished glass that once offered a commanding view of the city's sprawling ambition, its concrete canyons and glittering towers stretching into a hazy horizon, now reflected only a pale, distorted image of myself, a man I barely recognized, his shoulders slumped beneath the weight of an invisible burden that had suddenly materialized, heavy and cold. That morning, the crisp autumn air had carried the scent of wet leaves and distant wood smoke, a nostalgic perfume that promised a gentle transition, a slow fading of summer's warmth into winter's quiet embrace. But the reality inside these sterile walls had been far more abrupt, a brutal shearing, like a sudden, unexpected gust of wind ripping a leaf from its branch before it had even begun to turn. I remembered the texture of the plush, ergonomic chair, molded perfectly to my frame after years of quiet occupation, its cool, smooth leather now cool beneath my palm as I traced the armrest one last time, a farewell to a silent companion. For a decade, this space had been my fortress, my command center, a symbol of everything I had strived for, the tangible reward for countless late nights and moral compromises I had meticulously filed away in a forgotten drawer of my conscience, pretending they didn't exist, that they wouldn't eventually exact their price. I had built a life around this corner office, around the prestige and the demanding schedule, the quarterly reviews, the strategic initiatives that always somehow ended up benefiting a nameless bottom line more than any real human endeavor, a realization that gnawed at me now with an insistent, sickening churn in my stomach. The very air, once thick with the scent of ambition and freshly brewed coffee, now tasted stale, metallic, like the forgotten remnants of a dream. My journey to that corner office had been a meticulously planned ascent, a testament to ambition fueled by the roaring engine of the tech industry, a relentless climb where each rung pulled me higher, further from the ground. I remembered the early days, fresh out of college, diving headfirst into the exhilarating world of startups, where ideas sparked like static electricity in the air, and the energy was palpable, a constant hum of possibility. The air buzzed with innovation and the intoxicating promise of rapid wealth accumulation, a siren song that whispered of endless potential. I had quickly learned the language of venture capital, seed rounds, and exponential growth, acronyms and jargon that became as natural as breathing. My first job, a junior role at a promising tech startup, introduced me to the intricacies of market dynamics and the aggressive pursuit of investments, where every pitch was a gamble, every decision a potential fortune or failure. I devoured books on stocks and the stock market, charting hypothetical portfolios with meticulous care, the crisp turning of pages a soothing rhythm, dreaming of the day I could transition from an entry-level income to a substantial passive income stream, a life where money worked for me, rather than me ceaselessly working for it. There was a thrill in the chase, a satisfaction in seeing abstract numbers on a screen translate into tangible progress, an illusion of control that now seemed tragically naive. I believed then that intelligence and hard work were the sole arbiters of success, and I possessed both in abundance, or so I convinced myself. The polished gleam of new tech, the faint aroma of freshly printed circuit boards, the excited chatter of young, hungry minds, it all felt like the vanguard of a new world, and I was right there, at its cutting edge, confident that I was shaping my own destiny, one shrewd investment at a time. The initial excitement had been a potent elixir, blinding me to the subtle erosion of my personal life, the slow sacrifice of simple joys for the relentless pursuit of professional accolades and material gain. Over the years, my career trajectory had been nothing short of spectacular. I had moved from one high-growth company to another, each step upward marked by a significant increase in salary and a more impressive title, a steady drumbeat of validation. I learned to negotiate fiercely, my voice growing steadier, my arguments sharper, always securing better compensation packages, robust benefits, and increasingly attractive stock options, bundles of potential that felt like promises whispered directly into my ear. My understanding of corporate finance deepened, becoming an intuitive language, and I became adept at navigating the complex web of mergers, acquisitions, and initial public offerings, orchestrating deals with a detached precision that masked any underlying ethical qualms. I advised on multi-million-dollar deals, my reputation growing with each successful closure, each handshake, each signed document. I was seen as a visionary, a strategic thinker who could identify opportunities where others saw only risks, a master of the game. My income swelled to levels I once only fantasized about, allowing us to acquire a lifestyle I believed was well-deserved, a glittering trophy case of material comforts. The subtle aroma of success, a blend of expensive coffee and new car leather, clung to me, a constant affirmation of my choices. I reveled in the quiet power, the deference from junior colleagues, the nod of approval from senior executives. The world, or at least my corner of it, felt perfectly aligned, a symphony of my own making, with every note played exactly as intended. I even started to believe that I was indispensable, that my particular blend of aggression and foresight was too valuable to ever be discarded. The corner office was the culmination of this relentless drive. It signified not just professional achievement, but a perceived mastery over my financial destiny, a concrete testament to my will. I prided myself on my acumen, on my ability to manage both complex projects and my personal finances with equal precision. I had a robust investment portfolio, diversified across various sectors of the stock market, a meticulously balanced ecosystem designed to weather any storm, or so I thought, and several high-yield savings accounts that hummed with quiet efficiency. I believed I understood risk management implicitly, having seen colleagues soar and crash in the volatile tech landscape, learning from their spectacular missteps, confident in my own immunity. I lectured friends about the importance of a solid budget, maintaining good credit, and avoiding unnecessary debt, dispensing advice with the authority of someone who had truly conquered the financial world. I even dabbled in real estate, convinced it was a stable long-term investment, leveraging a significant mortgage for what I considered a smart asset acquisition, a tangible piece of the future. My confidence was boundless, bolstered by the constant influx of income and the seemingly endless upward climb of my career, a steady ascent towards an imagined peak that never seemed to arrive. The morning sun, slanting through the vast window, often painted my desk in gold, an almost theatrical spotlight on my perceived triumph. I felt invincible, truly. The coffee cup, an empty ceramic vessel with a faded company logo, sat on the polished mahogany desk, a stark reminder of the last hurried sip I took, a bitter, lukewarm mouthful before my boss's assistant, her face unreadable, a mask of practiced neutrality, had beckoned me into the conference room. It wasn't a meeting, it was an execution, a cold, clinical severing. The words, delivered with a rehearsed neutrality that stripped them of all human empathy, still echoed in the hollow chambers of my mind, reverberating with a chilling finality. Restructuring, optimization, difficult but necessary decisions. They were the corporate euphemisms for a betrayal, a cold calculation that rendered years of my life, my loyalty, my expertise, utterly meaningless, reducing my identity to a line item on a spreadsheet. I had built teams, closed deals, navigated turbulent market shifts, and pushed through countless projects that swelled the coffers of the investors, all while telling myself that the generous salary and the promise of a golden parachute justified the gnawing emptiness I often felt after another round of layoffs I had been forced to oversee, another product launch that felt more like a cynical manipulation than genuine innovation, another small piece of my soul chipped away. The fluorescent lights of the conference room had seemed brighter, colder, illuminating the faces of the corporate lawyers and HR representatives with an almost surgical clarity, their expressions impassive, professional, utterly devoid of any recognition for the decade I had given to this entity. The air, usually thick with the scent of ambition, now smelled faintly of ozone and regret, a metallic tang that made my teeth ache. I remembered the feeling of the heavy, cold conference table under my hands, a desperate anchor in a suddenly swirling world. My world, built on the shifting sands of tech boom and bust cycles, had finally chosen its moment to crumble, dissolving with a speed that left me breathless. The company, a once-agile startup that had ballooned into a behemoth, was shedding its older, higher-salaried skin, and I, it seemed, was part of the detritus, an expensive relic no longer deemed necessary. The air conditioning, usually a low whisper, seemed to sigh with a profound weariness, mirroring my own, a sound like a long, drawn-out exhalation of defeat. I thought of the polished, almost surgical precision with which my access was revoked, a quick flash of a company ID card that suddenly no longer worked, the polite but firm escort to my desk to gather personal items, the silent watch of the security guard as I packed, each movement scrutinized, making me feel like a thief in my own space. The heavy box of mementos, a collection of framed awards, old project photos, and a worn leather-bound planner, felt lighter than the intangible weight settling in my chest, a a crushing pressure that made it hard to breathe. The severance package, once a comforting thought, a safety net I believed I would never need, now felt like a paltry sum, a meager apology for a decade of my life, and a stark reminder that I was now adrift, a rudderless ship in an unforgiving economic ocean, stripped of direction and purpose. My carefully constructed financial plan seemed to evaporate into thin air, like mist in the morning sun, leaving nothing but dampness and uncertainty. The income stream that had sustained my family's comfortable life was abruptly cut off, leaving a chasm of uncertainty, a vast, echoing emptiness where security once resided. All my talk of shrewd investments and robust risk management felt like hollow boasts in the face of this sudden, undeniable vulnerability, a cruel joke played by destiny. The taste in my mouth was of ash and bitter disappointment, a persistent reminder of the sudden, drastic shift in my reality. The initial shock had been a physical blow, a tightening in my chest that made it hard to draw a full breath, as if an invisible fist had slammed into my sternum, followed by a wave of cold dread that seeped into my bones, chilling me from the inside out. I had walked out of that conference room, the familiar faces of my colleagues blurred into an unseeing tableau, their eyes fixed on their screens, avoiding mine, the sound of their keyboards a distant, irrelevant chatter, a world continuing without me. The elevator ride down had been a descent into a new reality, the city lights outside the glass shaft seeming to mock my sudden insignificance, each twinkling point a reminder of a bustling world that had no place for me. The polite farewell from the security guard, a man whose name I couldn't recall, felt like a final, impersonal dismissal. When I finally reached my car, the well-worn leather of the steering wheel felt alien, cold and smooth, not the comforting texture of something familiar, but a strange, unfamiliar surface beneath my fingertips. Driving home, the usual rush-hour traffic felt like an oppressive weight, each car a symbol of a life still in motion, still productive, still contributing, while mine had stalled, abruptly and without warning. The stark reality of my sudden unemployment began to sink in, not just as a professional setback, but as a profound financial crisis, a looming shadow over every aspect of my life. The drone of the engine, usually a comfort, now felt like a monotonous dirge, escorting me towards an uncertain future. The streetlights flickered by, each one a silent observer of my crumbling world. Our house, always a beacon of warmth and stability, a place of laughter and shared meals, now loomed with a different kind of presence. It was larger than we truly needed, a testament to my past ambition, a monument to a life I had thought secure, purchased at the peak of my earning power, adorned with a mortgage that felt increasingly like a lead anchor in a sea of rising interest rates, dragging us down. We had stretched ourselves thin, convinced that my career trajectory was an ever-upward arc, a constant climb towards greater financial security, a never-ending spiral of prosperity. We had poured most of our capital into the down payment, and while my investment portfolio was theoretically strong, its liquidity was not immediate, nor guaranteed in a downturn, leaving us exposed. We relied heavily on my consistent income to service the large debt we'd taken on, a behemoth of an obligation that now felt insurmountable. Now, the phrase "house poor" resonated with a chilling accuracy I had previously dismissed as a problem for others, a distant worry for those less fortunate, less savvy. The manicured lawn, neatly trimmed and edged, the freshly painted trim, still gleaming white, the very stones of the facade, all whispered of a financial obligation that had become a silent, crushing burden, a beautiful cage. The quiet anxiety of it had been a persistent background hum even before the layoff, a faint discordant note in the symphony of our comfortable life, a subtle unease I had chosen to ignore, but now it had swelled to a deafening roar, echoing through every empty room. The silence of the house when I walked in, devoid of the children's usual boisterous energy, felt heavy, almost accusatory. I remembered the late-night calculations, the mental gymnastics of juggling bills, pushing figures around like chess pieces on an invisible board, always striving to ensure everything balanced, to preserve the illusion of effortless prosperity. There was the unspoken tension that would sometimes fill the space between my wife and me during dinner, a delicate unease that was rarely acknowledged but always present, a faint tremor beneath the surface of our seemingly calm existence. We had a budget, of course, but it was one built for abundance, for comfortable consumption, not scarcity, not deprivation. We had always prioritized convenience and quality, rarely scrutinizing price tags in the grocery aisle or during online shopping sprees, accustomed to having enough and more. Now, every single expenditure would need careful consideration, every purchase a weighty decision. She had always been a worrier, her quiet nature masking a deep current of financial insecurity, a stark contrast to my seemingly boundless optimism, which now felt like a dangerous delusion, a reckless gamble on the future. I had often reassured her with facts and figures, pointing to our diverse investments and strong income projections, conjuring images of a secure, prosperous future. I had even considered setting up various passive income streams, exploring ideas for rental properties or dividend stocks, though I never got around to it, believing my active salary was more than sufficient, an unshakable bedrock of our financial lives. The faint scent of her favorite candle, burning low in the living room, seemed to accentuate the heavy silence between us, a silence fraught with unspoken fears and regrets. That evening the house felt colder, larger, the shadows longer, stretching like hungry fingers across the polished wooden floors, mirroring the growing darkness in my soul. My wife, sensing the shift in my demeanor the moment I walked through the door, the slump of my shoulders, the vacant look in my eyes, had offered a hesitant, questioning glance, her brow furrowed with a worry that instantly deepened my own despair. I had simply shaken my head, the words sticking in my throat, the bitter taste of defeat a tangible presence, dry and metallic on my tongue. The scent of the dinner she had prepared, usually a comfort, now felt heavy, almost suffocating. Later, as the children were tucked into their beds, their small, warm hands clinging to mine for a moment longer than usual, their innocent faces radiating trust, the confession had tumbled out, a raw, unvarnished admission of my sudden unemployment, delivered in a choked whisper. Her face, usually so serene, so composed, had crumpled, a silent despair etching lines around her eyes that had not been there before, lines that spoke of a deep, visceral fear I had once promised to protect her from. The initial comfort of her embrace, a momentary balm, had quickly given way to a quiet, simmering resentment that I later discovered was fueled by her own secret, a desperate act hidden in the shadows of our assumed partnership. It was during a strained conversation about our dwindling savings, a desperate attempt to map out a survival strategy, poring over bank statements and old bills late into the night, the only sound the rustle of paper, that the truth had surfaced, an ugly revelation that felt like another betrayal, deeper and more personal than the one delivered by my boss in that sterile conference room. The air in our small kitchen, usually filled with the comforting smells of dinner, had grown thick with unspoken accusations and the bitter tang of regret, a heavy weight pressing down on us both. The quiet click of the refrigerator door as she reached for a glass of water, the low hum of its motor, all seemed to underscore the sudden, profound chasm that had opened between us, a gaping void where trust and shared understanding once stood. The betrayal was not just about the money, but about the trust, the shared understanding of our financial vulnerability, which had been breached, leaving me feeling utterly alone and exposed. The chill from the open refrigerator door seemed to seep into my very bones. She had, in a moment of panic and ill-advised hope, consumed by the relentless chatter of online forums and the intoxicating allure of easy wealth, invested a substantial portion of our emergency fund, a sum meant for unforeseen disasters, for the unthinkable, into cryptocurrencies, chasing the tantalizing promise of quick returns she'd read about in fleeting online articles, seduced by the meteoric rise of Bitcoin and other altcoins, by stories of overnight millionaires. She had acted completely disregarding any fundamental principles of risk management, ignoring the inherent volatility, the speculative nature of such ventures. She had done it in secret, convinced she could surprise me with a windfall, a grand gesture that would somehow solidify our financial security. And now, the market had crashed, a brutal, unforgiving descent, taking with it not just the investment, but a significant chunk of our financial cushion, leaving us with nothing but regret and a gaping hole where our safety net should have been. The immediate aftermath was a blur of accusations and tears, a raw, painful unburdening of two separate, self-inflicted wounds. The late-night arguments, when they finally erupted, were quiet, choked things, laced with the kind of hurt that cut deeper than any shouted word, tearing at the very fabric of our shared life. We laid bare our financial anxieties, our individual fears and long-held insecurities, realizing with a horrifying clarity that we were both guilty of misjudgments, albeit different kinds. My over-reliance on a single income stream and blind belief in my own untouchable status, my corporate shield, was just as reckless as her speculative investment in cryptocurrencies without proper due diligence, without seeking any counsel. The kids, thankfully, were spared the raw edge of our despair, sleeping soundly in their rooms, oblivious to the storm raging beneath our roof. But the tension, thick and suffocating, permeated every corner of our home, a silent scream. We were both drowning, one of us pulled under by the sudden current of job loss, the other by a reckless gamble, and our once solid raft of a marriage was splintering beneath us, threatened by the relentless waves of debt and distrust. Each creak of the old house seemed to mock our fragile state. The crushing weight of the sandwich generation struggle, always present but manageable, a low-level hum of responsibility, now threatened to overwhelm us entirely, to bury us beneath its unforgiving layers. My parents, aging gracefully in their own home a few towns over, a familiar sanctuary filled with old books and the scent of my mother's baking, had been a source of quiet joy and occasional responsibility, a gentle pull on our resources. My father, with his booming laugh and unyielding optimism, a man who once seemed indestructible, had recently started to show the subtle signs of decline, small tremors in his hands, a slurring of words, a growing forgetfulness. A fall, a sudden, unexpected illness that had landed him in the hospital, the sterile smell of antiseptic clinging to his clothes, had been a prelude to a longer, more arduous battle, a slow, heartbreaking slide into fragility. The medical bills, a cruel irony of our healthcare system, designed to protect but often feeling predatory, had started to pile up, thick envelopes filled with incomprehensible codes and exorbitant figures, each one a fresh wound. Their insurance coverage, once seemingly robust, a reliable safety net, now felt woefully inadequate, leaving them with significant out-of-pocket expenses that quickly became a substantial debt, a black hole devouring their meager savings. Each bill felt like a punch to the gut, a stark reminder of the fragile balance between health and financial ruin, a stark truth laid bare. My mother, steadfast and strong, her silver hair often damp with worry, was doing her best, but her own anxiety was palpable in her hushed phone calls, her voice wavering as she recounted another doctor's visit, another prescription, another impossible choice. We had always contributed, happily, to their care, a quiet understanding of familial duty, a natural extension of love, but now, with my income gone and our savings depleted by my wife's failed investments, the prospect of supporting them felt like an insurmountable mountain, a peak lost in the clouds of despair. Our family budget became an agonizing exercise in triage, prioritizing immediate survival over all else, cutting into the bone of our existence. The once comforting aroma of my parents' home, a blend of wood polish and simmering stew, was now tinged with the faint, unsettling smell of illness and worry. The children, oblivious in their innocent joy, their laughter echoing through the halls like tiny bells, continued to grow, their needs expanding with them, each new stage bringing its own demands. The school field trip, a brightly colored flyer slipped under the door, the new pair of shoes for growing feet, the extra tutoring for a struggling subject, each small request, once easily fulfilled with a swipe of a card, now felt like a complex equation requiring careful deliberation and often a painful denial, a quiet no that chipped away at my spirit. Their college savings accounts, once a point of pride, a testament to our foresight, felt suddenly vulnerable, their future investments now less certain, overshadowed by the immediate crisis. I would watch them play in the backyard, their laughter a bright, clear sound against the rustling leaves, and feel a surge of protectiveness mixed with a profound sense of failure, a crushing realization that I was letting them down. The quiet anxiety over soaring inflation, always a distant news headline, a background hum in the financial news, became a tangible daily dread, a tightening vice around our meager resources. The supermarket trips became an exercise in mental arithmetic, a grim accounting of every penny, comparing unit prices, foregoing familiar brands for cheaper, lesser-known alternatives, the fluorescent lights harsh on my worried face. Our food budget had to be drastically cut, forcing us to rethink every meal, every ingredient, every single bite. The chill of the morning air, once a refreshing sensation on my skin, now brought with it the dread of the next utility bill, an ominous sum that seemed to climb higher with each passing month, each tick of the thermometer. Gas prices, the cost of a simple loaf of bread, the rising expense of electricity, every little thing added to the ever-increasing cost of living, squeezing us tighter and tighter in its unforgiving grip, diminishing the real value of any income we could scrounge together, making every dollar feel like it was shrinking before our eyes. The thin walls of our home seemed to amplify every creak, every sigh, every quiet worry. My old student loan debt, a relic from my younger days, a sum I had confidently dismissed as a minor annoyance, a footnote in my journey to wealth, had suddenly resurfaced as a significant burden, a ravenous beast demanding its due. The automatic payments, once barely noticeable against my high salary, a mere blip on my monthly statement, were now a gaping hole in our meager budget, a wound that refused to heal. The dreams of refinancing, of finally shedding that lingering obligation, evaporated like morning mist, leaving only the cold, hard reality. My credit score, once pristine, a symbol of my financial responsibility, felt like it was hanging by a thread, jeopardizing any future ability to borrow or restructure our finances, trapping us in a cycle of diminishing options. I found myself staring at the numbers on the bank statements, the red figures blurring into an angry crimson, a sickening lurch in my stomach as I saw our balance dwindle. The weight of this accumulated debt, a silent, omnipresent companion, became suffocating, pressing down on my chest until it felt hard to breathe, a constant, low thrum of anxiety that never truly faded. Each piece of junk mail from creditors felt like an accusation. The professional jealousy and financial comparison that had poisoned friendships in the past, a subtle undercurrent of competition, a silent tally of who had more, who was rising faster, now seemed utterly irrelevant, or perhaps simply shifted into a new, more profound form of self-condemnation. I remembered the friend, a former colleague, who had leveraged his tech skills into a successful startup, his Instagram feed a constant parade of exotic vacations and luxury cars, a glossy tableau of effortless affluence. Before the layoff, I had envied him, quietly measured my own success against his, felt a twinge of dissatisfaction with my own investment returns compared to his explosive wealth generation. Now the thought of his extravagant life brought only a hollow ache, a recognition of how far I had fallen, and a stark realization of how little those superficial trappings truly mattered, how easily they could be lost. My attention had completely shifted from chasing stocks or the next big investment opportunity, from the abstract thrill of the market, to the immediate, desperate need for any steady income, any lifeline to keep our heads above water. The scent of my worn old office sweater, still hanging in the closet, brought with it a sudden, sharp pang of nostalgia for a life that, for all its flaws, had felt secure. The instability of a midlife career change, a concept I had idly mused about in moments of discontent, a hypothetical exploration of new horizons, had now been thrust upon me with brutal force, a sudden, inescapable reality. My skills, once cutting-edge, once highly sought after, felt obsolete in a rapidly evolving market, like an old piece of software in a world of constant upgrades. The endless cycle of job applications, each one a meticulously crafted plea, the impersonal rejection emails that landed in my inbox with a dull thud, the soul-crushing interviews where I felt like a relic from a bygone era, my experience suddenly viewed as a liability rather than an asset. It was a daily grind that chipped away at my self-worth, eroding my confidence piece by painful piece. I longed for the days when my expertise was valued, when my opinions carried weight, when my income was a given, an unspoken certainty, but now I was just another anonymous applicant, my resume a digital file among thousands, competing for salaries far below what I once commanded, chasing shadows of my former self. I explored options for developing passive income streams, researching everything from online courses to small e-commerce ventures, the sheer volume of information overwhelming, but every path felt like it required capital I no longer possessed or expertise I hadn't yet acquired, putting it perpetually out of reach. I even considered trying to launch my own small startup, a desperate attempt to reclaim agency, but the thought of securing investments in my current state, with my tarnished resume and dwindling resources, felt like a cruel joke, a delusion I couldn't afford. The cold touch of the laptop keys under my fingers felt like a constant reminder of the digital wall between me and opportunity. The moral compromises I had made for my high-paying but soul-crushing job, the small ethical shortcuts, the quiet rationalizations that allowed me to sleep at night, now felt like lead weights in my gut, a suffocating burden of guilt. I had told myself it was for my family, for their security, for the corner office with its panoramic view, for the glittering promise of an unassailable future. But what security was it, truly, if it came at the cost of my integrity, and ultimately evaporated in an instant, leaving us more vulnerable than before? I remembered a specific project, a data mining initiative that skirted the edges of privacy, something I had pushed through with a vague sense of unease, suppressing the quiet voice of dissent within me, prioritizing the company's bottom line and my own career progression over ethical considerations, over the well-being of countless anonymous users. I had dismissed concerns about risk management in data privacy, rationalizing it as industry standard, a necessary evil in the pursuit of innovation and profit. Now that voice was loud, insistent, a constant companion in the silence of my unemployment, echoing my complicity. I had traded my peace of mind for a paycheck, for a substantial income, and the market had called my bluff, revealing the true cost of my choices. I realized that true wealth was not just measured in stocks or investments, in abstract numbers on a screen, but in integrity and peace of mind, in the quiet assurance of a clear conscience, values I had inadvertently mortgaged away, selling them off piece by painful piece. The sterile scent of the office, now a distant memory, was replaced by the cloying smell of regret. There were days during the depths of our financial crisis when the strain on my marriage felt unbearable, when the silence was a physical entity between us, heavier than any argument. The silences stretched longer, the gulf between us wider, filled with unspoken accusations and the bitter residue of disappointment. The thought of divorce, a stark, painful image, sometimes flickered through my mind, a terrifying escape from the suffocating pressure of debt and dwindling savings, a desperate impulse to simply sever the ties that seemed to be drowning us. But then I would catch a glimpse of my wife's tired face as she managed 1,000 small household tasks, her brow furrowed with exhaustion, or the way she instinctively reached for my hand during a particularly difficult conversation about our parents, her touch a silent anchor, and a different kind of strength would emerge, a quiet, resilient love that had weathered storms before, a deep current of affection that persisted beneath the superficial wounds. We were not perfect, our flaws laid bare, but we were bound by something deeper than just shared finances and a mortgage. We were a family, albeit a bruised and battered one, still standing, still fighting. We had to relearn how to communicate about money, to establish a realistic budget that reflected our new reality, and to create new financial plans that were grounded in our new reality, not past illusions of wealth and limitless income. We acknowledged that my wife's cryptocurrency investment had been a desperate misstep, a painful lesson in risk management, a gamble born of fear, but also that my own hubris had blinded me to the fragility of our financial security, to the precariousness of a life built on a single, high-flying income stream. The lingering scent of her perfume, a familiar comfort, now carried a faint undertone of sorrow, but also slowly a fragile hope. We started making small, conscious changes, each one a tiny act of defiance against despair, a deliberate step towards a new way of living. The expensive coffee shop near my old building, a symbol of my past indulgence, was replaced by a thermos of home-brewed, carefully measured coffee, the aroma of which filled our kitchen each morning, a small, grounding ritual. The impulse grocery buys, the casually tossed-in treats, vanished from our cart. We started cooking more at home, simple meals, the smell of simmering onions and garlic, of herbs fresh from our small patch, a small comfort in the evenings, a tangible act of creation that fed us body and soul. Our weekly budget became a sacred document, meticulously planned and adhered to, a blueprint for survival, a testament to our new discipline. We cut out all non-essential spending, canceling subscriptions, finding free entertainment in walks through the park or library books, and learning to say no to things we once considered necessities, recognizing the true difference between need and want. The kids, sensing the shift but never truly understanding the depth of our worries, became more appreciative of small things, their resilience a quiet inspiration. A trip to the local park, the crunch of fallen leaves underfoot, a shared storybook on the couch, the comforting weight of a child asleep in my lap, a game of cards that filled the room with quiet laughter. These became the new luxuries, valued not for their cost, but for the quiet, unadulterated joy they brought, moments of pure, unburdened connection. I found myself spending more time in the garden, turning the soil with my bare hands, the cool, damp earth a balm to my frayed nerves, coaxing life from seeds, watching green shoots emerge with a profound sense of satisfaction. The feel of the earth beneath my fingernails, the scent of damp soil and burgeoning green shoots was a tangible creation, a quiet act of defiance against the intangible losses of my former life. I discovered a surprising solace in the routine, the simplicity, the rhythm of nature, a stark contrast to the relentless, artificial pace of my old corporate world. The rough texture of the trowel, the delicate feel of a seedling, these simple physical sensations grounded me. The mornings, once a frantic dash, a blur of deadlines and commutes, became slower, punctuated by the chirping of birds outside our window and the gentle rhythm of breakfast with my children, their small voices a melody of innocence. My wife and I started talking again, really talking, late into the night, after the kids were asleep, the only light the soft glow of a bedside lamp, not about finances or problems, but about our hopes, our fears, the future we still, somehow, wanted to build together, a future reimagined. The anger at her crypto gamble slowly receded, replaced by a shared understanding of fear and desperation, and a renewed commitment to transparency in all our financial dealings, a promise of open books and shared burdens. We were learning to lean on each other, to admit our vulnerabilities, to forgive, understanding that we were both human, both flawed, both struggling. We even started to educate ourselves more deeply on diversified investments and proper risk management, poring over articles and books, promising each other we would never again make unilateral financial decisions that could jeopardize our family, that we would move forward as a united front. The quiet ticking of the old wall clock in the kitchen became a comforting sound, marking the passage of healing time. The weight of supporting my parents was still immense, a heavy mantle of responsibility, but we approached it differently. Instead of just sending money we didn't have, writing checks that felt increasingly hollow, we offered our time, our presence, the most precious gift we could give. I spent weekends at their house, the familiar scent of old books and faded potpourri a comforting constant, fixing leaky faucets, tending their garden, pruning their overgrown roses, bringing them home-cooked meals my wife had prepared with love and care, simple stews and casseroles that filled their small kitchen with warmth. We helped them navigate their complex insurance claims, poring over dense paperwork, and understand their medical debt, deciphering the confusing language of the healthcare system. My father, in his moments of clarity, his eyes bright with fleeting recognition, would grip my hand, his skin papery and thin, his eyes conveying a silent gratitude that transcended any financial aid, any monetary contribution. My mother, seeing us together, sharing the load, would smile, a genuine, unburdened smile that made all the effort worthwhile, a beacon of hope in our shared struggle. It was a different kind of support, perhaps more valuable than money alone, a reaffirmation of family bonds that had always been there, just obscured by the relentless demands of my corporate life and the constant pursuit of more income. The taste of her homemade cookies, a simple pleasure from childhood, felt sweeter now, tinged with a quiet understanding of love. I haven't found a new corner office or anything close to my old salary. The job search continues, a slow, often disheartening process filled with rejection and self-doubt, but my perspective has shifted. I've taken on some freelance consulting work, piecing together an income that, while modest, allows us to keep our heads above water, albeit barely, a patchwork quilt of small earnings. I've even started exploring genuinely viable passive income strategies, learning from my past mistakes rather than chasing fleeting cryptocurrency fads or speculative get-rich-quick schemes. The idea of launching a small, sustainable startup that aligns with my values, built on ethical principles and genuine contribution, has even begun to take root, a fragile but persistent seed of an idea. The house still feels too big sometimes, its empty rooms echoing with our changed circumstances, the mortgage a constant presence, a looming shadow, but it's also filled with the vibrant sound of my children's laughter, the quiet comfort of my wife's presence, the memory of shared meals and whispered confessions of new beginnings. The house poor label still applies, a stark reality of our budget, but the feeling of being trapped has lessened, replaced by a sense of ownership, a realization that this is our space, regardless of its financial burden, and it is here that we are rebuilding, brick by quiet brick. We continue to stick to our strict budget, making small investments where we can, no longer solely focused on stocks or the market's whims, but on long-term stability and genuine financial health, on a sustainable future. The rough texture of our old sofa, once a backdrop to busy evenings, is now a comforting haven for family time. The crisp chill of the morning air still holds the promise of winter, and the grocery bills still cause a pang of anxiety, a familiar knot in my stomach, but I wake up now with a different kind of purpose. It's not about climbing the corporate ladder or accumulating wealth through relentless income generation or speculative investments. It's about the quiet strength of my family, the resilience of my wife, the innocent joy of my children, the unwavering love for my aging parents. I may have lost the corner office, that symbol of a life I once thought I wanted, but I've gained a deeper understanding of what truly matters, a richness that no salary could ever buy, a profound peace that surpasses any material gain. The grand ambitions of my past have been replaced by the quiet contentment of the present, a gently bittersweet acceptance of life's unpredictable turns, of the winding path we find ourselves on. I am still here, still navigating the challenges, still facing the uncertainties of our finances, but I am learning to find new meaning in the everyday struggles, finding warmth in the small moments, in the touch of a hand, the scent of a home-cooked meal, the laughter of a child, and slowly, surely, learning to be content with what I have, even if it's far less than I once believed I needed, far less than I once pursued. There is a quiet strength in surviving, in adapting, in finding the beauty in the broken pieces, in seeing the true value of life beyond the numbers on a balance sheet. Thanks listening this story. Now I want to hear your thoughts in the comments. Let's see how global our community is. Comment your country down below. Share this story to your friends and leave a like and subscribe for more episodes like this.